bad headache. And it lasted pretty much all day. I was just kind of taking pain meds, thought it was a headache, thought nothing of it. Then the next day, Wednesday the 2nd, I woke up, my headache was gone, but I started to realize over the course of the day that I had lost feeling in my right side, and I was having increasing trouble speaking as the day went on. So I called my mom, talked to her, and my grandpa actually is a doctor. He was a rheumatologist, and now he's retired. But she talked to him, and I talked to her, and eventually around 4 o'clock, I was like, I need to go to the hospital. So my poor lovely roommate drove me to the hospital, and we actually went to the student health center on campus first, and but they weren't really accepting students for anything other than like regular student health stuff because of COVID and everything. So we actually had to ask a security guard who was working there at the time. We were like, where is the nearest hospital or ER that we can go to? And he recommended Doctor's Hospital, which is part of Baptist Health. Okay. So I got there, I got to the ER, and the stress was making it even more difficult for me to speak by that point. Because I had realized, something was wrong, and everyone was asking me questions like, what's your name, date of birth, your address, your insurance, and all of that. So I had like my driver's license and my insurance card, and I ended up just like showing it to people. And my roommate had to tell everybody what happened. And so they took me to get a CAT scan, and I came back and waited for a little bit, and they were like, so we took a look at your CAT scan, and it looks like you've had a stroke. And honestly, by that point, while it's scary to be told that you've had a stroke, it was kind of a relief in a way to know like what was going on with me. And so after that, I kind of calmed down a little bit and was able to talk a little bit more because, I didn't have the added stress on top of, the stroke. So then we just waited for the ambulance to get here, to get to Doctor's Hospital, to take me back to the like main Baptist Health Hospital Center. I don't know.
Baptist Hospital.
And the two guys in the ambulance were really nice. They were cool. And then when I got there, there was like a whole team of nurses and like doctors and assorted people that met me as I was being like wheeled in. And they started asking me questions again, and it was very frustrating because I knew the answers to the questions that they were asking me, like an emergency contact for my mom and what's her phone number. And I couldn't like get the numbers out, so I had to look up on my phone. I had my phone with me, and so I had to like show them her phone number and stuff. But they were telling me, what was going on, and that I had a stroke, and that they were going to go and suck the clot out of my brain. And so I was like, can I FaceTime my parents so that they can, hear what's going on? They're a little coherent. They can write down, what's going on, and just so that I don't have to relay it to them later. And so I FaceTimed my parents, and Dr. Linfante was there, and all of the nurses, and they all spoke to my parents and told them what was going on. And then I went into surgery, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the stroke ward, and it was like 9:30 at night.
And No, go ahead. I mean, what did you see? Well, how did you feel, or do you remember after waking up?
I was groggy, because the anesthesia, and anesthesia also usually makes me pretty nauseous. So I was not feeling great, but all things considered, not so bad. And I would say almost immediately, as soon as I had gotten out of surgery, minus the grogginess of the anesthesia, I was able to communicate with people, and really the only barrier to me being able to do that was being groggy from the anesthesia and it being like 10 o'clock at night. And so I spent a couple hours in the stroke ward, and then around like 1 or 2 a.m., they transferred me to the ICU. I don't know. Do you
Oh,
want
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're doing great recounting everything, so I let you speak. At that point, you spend the night in the hospital. I mean, you spend the night or a couple nights at the hospital, or
Yeah.
okay.
So actually, I spent that night in the ICU, and then the next day, in the middle of the day, I got transferred out of the ICU to the neurology center, and which was a lot less intense than the ICU. They were able to unhook me from some of the machines, which was very cool. And I actually ended up staying in the hospital until the following Tuesday, the Tuesday after Labor Day.
Okay.
Because they were doing a bunch of tests. They were doing, a blood test to see if my blood was it was thick and prone to clotting. I had done an ultrasound on my heart to see if I had a PFO. And when they saw the ultrasound, they were like, it looks like you might have a PFO. So they wanted to do a TEE to actually verify that. And they wanted to do it on Friday, but I didn't know that they were going to do it on Friday, and no one had told anyone around me. So they brought me breakfast on Friday morning, and I started eating. And Dr. Friedman, the cardiologist, came in to tell me that they wanted to do a TEE, but because I had already eaten breakfast, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it that day, so I had to stay the whole long weekend so that they could do it on Tuesday. So I spent the long weekend there, and by that point I was, essentially fine. I had recovered all of my ability to communicate. I was visited by occupational therapy and physical therapy while I was in the ICU, and I could walk, I could talk, I could move, grab things.
And that Dr. Linfante mentioned, I think, he called your parents after the thrombectomy and put them all at ease and explained that everything. Were you there when he called parents, or were your parents after?
No. Either I wasn't there or I was still so groggy from the anesthesia that I don't remember it. My parents told me that he called them afterwards, but I don't have any direct memory of that.
And I know you mentioned your grandfather was a rheumatologist, and
yes.
and you talked to your parents before you went to the hospital, and then they told you eventually you had a stroke.
Yes.
In your mind, did you fully understand? And you said you felt a little better because at least you knew, but did you understand the severity of a stroke and on how unusual it may be for someone as young as yourself and healthy?
It was definitely surprising for me because, I thought that strokes don't really happen to people my age. So that was not really something that I had ever expected to have to deal with at this point in my life.
Right. And you have no underlying health issues of concern?
None. And there's not even any family history of heart attack or stroke or anything. So I really didn't think this was something that I was gonna have to be too concerned about really ever.
Well, and then I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was trying to remember the other question you asked me. What was it?
I'm not sure. No,
There
I
were
think
like parts to that question, and I
I think you
didn't.
answered. I think you answered it. I mean,
Oh, okay.
whether did you understand fully what a stroke meant, and were you surprised? Obviously, you were surprised and some
Well,
relief. At least they. But go ahead.
what I didn't understand, kind of until later, was how large the clot was. Because right when I came out of surgery, they showed me a picture of it,
Right.
and I remember seeing it, but I didn't have any frame of reference for like how big it was supposed to be. But I was like, I really don't know anything, but that looks too big to have been in my brain. I was like, that doesn't look right. And they were like, no, that's just, it was just really big.
Right. I will tell you that we spoke to Dr. Abrams, who connected with Doctors Hospital and had you come to Baptist, and he said when he saw that he was concerned because you were so young and symptoms were kind of mild compared to other stroke that he didn't want you to like fall through the cracks, so to speak.
Yeah.
So he was very concerned, and to much to his credit, he made everything start rolling, to get you to Baptist. I don't know if you knew this before.
Yeah, I actually spoke to him one of the days I was in the hospital. I think it was like Monday, right before I was about to get out on Tuesday. And yeah, it was very surprising to me, considering what my symptoms were, how big and severe looking the clot was. Because I mean, I really only lost sensation in my right hand. I could still move it and grab things and like walk. And with the exception of speaking, which became a much larger problem as time went on, I was functioning.
Right. Right. And then they tell you about the PFO.
Yeah.
Also known as hole in the heart.
Yeah.
A great way of putting it, I guess, very succinctly. How did you react to that? And did you know about this PFO or condition that affects a lot of people, but mostly doesn't really, doesn't affect their heart, their health? Did you know about PFOs, and how did you how'd you react to that, or
So Dr. Friedman was the one who came in to speak to me about that. And, initially when someone comes in and says to you, you have a hole in your heart, that sounds very serious and very scary. And I was like, oh God, but then he was like, actually it happens to, it exists in about a quarter of the population or a third. I don't know. He gave me some numbers. Which was wild to me because I just didn't think that people could just be walking around with a hole in their heart. Yeah, I don't know. I was very, very interesting to learn. Because once he explained it, it makes sense how the clot can just get like sucked through to the other side and go where it's not supposed to go.
Right. And often it's diagnosed in situations like yours with people who have severe migraines and they go to get checked out, or stroke, or TIA, which is a mini stroke, and that's what happened with you. And it tends to happen in younger folks, well, younger than 50, when they discover this PFO. So. So are you? I know the procedure is set for next week, right?
Yes, and it's been rescheduled several times because of problems with the insurance and COVID tests. But it is scheduled for this Thursday, not next Thursday.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm just kind of looking forward to getting everything settled and done with.
Well, you're in great hands over there at MCVI. I'm telling you, they're an incredible team over there. So, anything from your how have your parents dealt with this from Texas? I don't know if they're still in Texas or here.
So they're not. So my grandparents that I mentioned earlier, they actually live in West Palm Beach.
Oh.
So on Thursday, when I got out of surgery, or on Friday, actually, I think they started driving down to South Florida. They didn't want to take a plane because of COVID-19, and my grandparents are elderly, so they didn't want to, take the risk of transmitting anything to them. But they started driving down here, and they've been staying with my grandparents in West Palm Beach, and they wanted to stay, until I got the PFO closure procedure and everything. So I think they're getting ready to leave this weekend.
Really? Okay. I know Dr. Abrams was saying, he has kids your age, and some of us have kids your age, so I can imagine what they went through, and so I don't know. Yeah, I'm glad that everyone was well communicated with them. Just briefly, you're a UM student. Can you tell us about your major and how long you've been there? Or
so I'm a junior,
okay.
And my major is actually in vocal performance. So that's classical singing. I'm studying opera, essentially.
So when you had your issue with the speech issue initially, I mean, did you? And once I hit you a little harder than, this is not only your voice, which is important as it is, but your future livelihood or what have you, your passion, I guess. Did that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And aside from just singing, I'm also really interested in literature. That's my minor, actually, is in English literature. And so, writing and reading and stuff like that are very important to me. So.
Fantastic. Anything else you want to add other than what we've covered already? That regarding your care at Baptist, or just looking back at what happened to you? It's only been 3 weeks, or
yeah.
It's amazing. You sound great. You look great. By the way, so tell us what you're feeling when you reflect on this.
Yeah, all the doctors and nurses that I interacted with were great. They were all very, very good at communicating with me, everything that was going on. And it was really kind of a learning experience for me. I got to learn so many things about, the body, which, not the way that I wanted to learn them, but, it was just very, very educational experience, I would say. Yeah, I don't know. And they've also tried to get me scheduled for the PFO closure as soon as possible, because my parents can't stay down here forever. So they've been really good about that too.
So your future plans are still intact. You haven't changed anything.
No, I'm continuing with my semester here at UM. It's been a little hectic trying to juggle all the appointments on top of classes, but if that's the worst inconvenience that I have to deal with coming out of this, that's fine by me, Yeah,
no, that's great.
So yeah.
You've done a great job of recounting everything. I'm going to turn it over to Carol. I don't know, Carol, you want to ask? Carol, you're on.
Sorry, unmuted.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think I'll let Steve ask his questions first because I think he has to do a couple things a little shorter or different, and then I'll go last.
Okay. All right. So, Cannon, basically, I'm going to ask you the same questions, but for video, I need shorter answers. So I'm going to kind of break up what you went through. That way, when you give me the answers, they'll be a little bit shorter, and I can kind of piece it together pretty nicely.
Okay.
So I'm pretty much going to go right back to the beginning. So remember, kind of a little short. It's going to be the first one is explain to me what were your symptoms prior to going to the hospital.
Sure. So.
Hold on.
Hold on.
You're frozen.
You're frozen.
Did I jinx it? I jinxed it.
I went to the hospital on. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Am I back? Okay. So, I went to the hospital on Wednesday night, the 2nd. But my symptoms actually started on Tuesday. I woke up at 5:30 that morning with a horrible headache. And I just kind of thought nothing of it, went to bed. But Wednesday I woke up and my headache was gone. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I had lost feeling in my right side. And over the course of the day, it became increasingly difficult for me to speak and communicate with people.
Perfect. At any point while this was happening, did it ever cross your mind, I had a stroke?
I definitely knew that something was seriously wrong, but I didn't really consider that it might have been a stroke because I just didn't think that strokes really happen to people my age. And there's nothing in my family history of heart attack or stroke or blood clotting or anything. So it wasn't really something that was kind of on my radar. Although I will say, when I was talking to my roommate about what was going on, she told me later that she started thinking, she was like, is she having a stroke? So I guess she knew better than I did.
All right. And so you went over to Doctor's Hospital. What did they do for you at Doctor's Hospital?
So at Doctor's, they did a CAT scan, and that was where they eventually told me that I had a stroke. Because everybody, seemed a little confused at first why I was there, because I was, relatively functional. I had a little trouble communicating, but they were all very surprised when they looked at my CAT scan and they were like, you had a stroke. So.
Okay. And so from there, so they decided to transfer you and they took you over to Baptist Hospital.
Yeah.
So when you arrived at Baptist Hospital, you said before that there was a whole team waiting for you. Explain to me a little bit about what happened when you got to Baptist Hospital.
So I got off the ambulance, being wheeled in. And as soon as I got in, it looked like this large crowd of people. It was probably not that many, but to me it seemed like a lot of people. And, they started asking me, questions, date of birth, emergency contacts, that kind of thing. And then finally we got to outside the room where they were going to do the procedure, and Dr. Linfante started talking to me about how they were going to get the clot out of my brain. And I asked if I could FaceTime my parents because I was, not entirely functioning at the time, and I wanted someone to be able to write down, what was going on. And I was also sure that they would want to know. So I FaceTimed them, and he talked to them, and the nurses talked to them, and they were able to make them feel a little bit reassured about what was going to happen to me.
Good. Actually, I'm going to have you just kind of redo the beginning of that a little bit, just so you can say something like, after they transported me to Baptist Hospital. Because when I put this together, it's not gonna be known where you were once in the next. So if you can say, once they transferred me to Baptist Hospital, this is what happened. And
okay.
We don't have to go through the whole story because I can probably make an edit point.
Okay. So after they transferred me to Baptist Hospital, there was this large crowd of nurses and doctors ready to meet me and take down all my information, emergency contacts, all that stuff. Is that good?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll make it work from there.
Thank you.
And then, okay, so you said when they told you that you had a stroke, you were somewhat relieved. Tell me a little bit about hearing that you had a stroke.
So when I heard that I had a stroke, I was, it sounds weird, but a little bit relieved to actually know, what was going on, what was happening to me. But I was also very surprised because, strokes weren't really on my radar as something that could happen to me at my age. And also with my family history, there was nothing, to indicate that. So it was definitely a surprise.
Perfect. As John said, I'm one of those parents that has a daughter that's the exact same age as you, and it gives me chills to know about getting that kind of a phone call. So tell me a little bit about what happened when you talked to your parents about it.
So when I FaceTimed my parents right before I was about to go into surgery to get the clot removed, I actually don't really remember much about that phone call because there was so much going on. There were like a bunch of people all around me, and it felt like all of them were talking at once. But I do know that Dr. Linfante was able to explain to them, you know, what was going on, what was going to happen to me, what he was going to do, and you know, reassure them a little bit as much as he could, that they were going to do everything they could to take care of me. So
Perfect. And so, once you had the procedure to remove the clot, how did you feel afterwards?
So, after I had the procedure to remove the clot, I was obviously groggy from the anesthesia, but I immediately felt some of my ability to communicate and speak, you know, returning. Because it was, at that point, it was basically just a matter of the anesthesia, you know, fully, completely wearing off. And I was back to almost my normal self.
And so, how do you feel now?
Now I feel fine. It took about a week or two, but eventually all the sensation came back, on my right side. You know, I'm able to do all of the things that I did before. You know, really the sensation was the only thing that I was waiting for it to come back. Nia, get out of the frame. I'm sorry.
All right, and so, have they said anything about this being a concern to you in the future or anything like that?
So I have to take aspirin every day, just as a preventative measure. But they did say that after they close the PFO, it greatly reduces my risk of ever having a stroke again. So that's really reassuring, because I know, like, when you have a stroke, you know, it's more likely that you'll have one, you know, again. But getting the PFO closure and hearing about how that'll reduce my risk was a relief to me.
Great. And so tell me, you know, I don't know how much of this crossed your mind, since you're studying classical music. How much did you ever think about all of a sudden you're not going to be able to sing or anything like that? And how did you feel?
Yeah. So when I was having trouble speaking and everything, singing didn't cross my mind as a concern at the time, but one of my secondary interests, my minor actually, is in English literature. And so writing and communicating and reading is something that matters a lot to me. So that was definitely a concern to me at the time.
Okay. I have two more things. I'm going to have you just kind of make a statement of saying, I'm a junior at University of Miami and I'm studying whatever. Okay. And you can go from there.
Yeah. So I'm a junior at the University of Miami, and I am studying vocal performance, which essentially is